Welcome back to Hardball. We're back with former Bush 41 Justice Department official David Rifkin and Melanie Sloan, executive director of the group called Crew, who's also defending Joe and Valerie Wilson, or actually representing them in this civil action that he's involved with now. Let me go to Melanie for a few minutes here. Melanie, what do you think your client, Joe Wilson, will accomplish on the stand of the House of Representatives next week?
Well, I think he'll talk about how disappointing the fact is that that Bush has commuted Scooter Libby's sentence, given the fact that Bush originally said that anybody who leaked Valerie Plame's name, anybody involved in this would be fired and there would be serious consequences, and now there's shown to be no consequences whatsoever for anyone involved in it. And I think while Mr. Wilson will certainly say that the president has the right to commute any sentence under the Constitution, it's disappointing that he would do so in this case, and that they still owe Valerie Wilson and all covert operatives, in fact, in the United States, a deep and sincere apology. Here was a patriot who was serving her country, and for political purposes, this White House chose to disclose her identity.
Who did the disclosing?
Well, it seems like several people did the disclosing, really. Richard Armitage did it, but so did Karl Rove, and so did Scooter Libby.
Let's go through those so people understand exactly your memory and our joint memories of what happened. Richard Armitage was #2 at the State Department. He was called up by Bob Novak, the Prince of Darkness he's called. He's a conservative columnist. And during the course of that conversation, he told Bob Novak, we're told now, about the identity of Valerie Wilson, that she worked for the CIA. Now, do you believe that was part of an administration plot?
I believe that Richard Armitage was given that information by the Vice President's office, by Scooter Libby. He would never have had that information if the Vice President's office hadn't been seeking it out. And then he disclosed it to Bob Novak, but at the same time,
no, wait a minute. Do you believe that was part of a plot?
It.
Was that part of a plot to leak?
Yes, I think that there was a concerted effort to leak Valerie Plame's name in an effort to punish Joseph Wilson for undercutting.
Okay, well, just want to get this straight. You keep going around this, Melanie. Is the decision by Armitage to give this information to Bob Novak part of a plot?
It certainly seems to be, yes.
How so? He was against the war, Armitage.
You know, he was doing his boss's bidding. He was giving away Valerie Plame's name while it was a covert, when she was a covert officer.
But who told Armitage to do this?
Well, it seems like someone in the Vice President's office may well have had something to do with that.
May well have had something to do with it. That's a charge.
That's, of course, Chris, why we have a civil suit, so that we can take the deposition testimony of these people and get to the bottom of this, exactly what happened.
But how do you charge somebody with doing something if you don't even know they did it? You don't even seem to know what Armitage's motive was, or that he was operating under any obstructions, and now you're asserting that he was.
Well, I'm sorry, but you certainly can't know somebody's motives until you've sat down and questioned them about them. We haven't had the opportunity to take the deposition testimony of anybody in this case yet, and that's what a complaint does. It alleges facts that you believe to be true, and then you go out and you try and prove them through discovery.
Chris, yes, David.
This is ironic, or it shows you how wrong their narrative is this. Not only Mr. Armitage was an opponent of the war, but by all accounts, including Bob Woodward's, he despised the Vice President and everybody in his office. He actually gave this information to Novak in a typical Washington fashion. I'm sure you had the benefit of some of those. As an oddity is, look, here's the guy who went on this trip to Niger. Isn't it funny? His wife works at the CIA on the same side of issues. Kind of a, isn't it bizarre? That's what Novak himself said.
Yeah.
So that just underscores how ridiculous the whole conspiracy narrative here is. Okay.
Yeah.
There was clearly a conspiracy here. Whether or not Richard Armitage was part of it, certainly Vice President Cheney, Karl Rove, and Scooter Libby were part of it. They were contacting reporters time after time after time.
Okay, I wish I had more time, Melanie. We'll have to have you back. So you contend that Scooter and Karl also leaked as well as Armitage leaking?
Absolutely.
But Chris, very briefly, don't you think, and with all due respect to Valerie Plame, which you have nothing against, the fact that she had something to do with sending her husband to work in an area that she also worked on and had some use, do you not think that let's call it gently, arguable nepotism has something to do?
There is no evidence that Valerie Plame had anything to do with sending Joe Wilson to Niger.
But that is I don't know that to be the fact, but that is the speculation. But do you not think, for example, that if you work at EPA, that even if you're not the one involved in it, having your husband sent in a sensitive regulatory area might in some ways impugn the credibility of that person fighting? Or if you work at the Treasury Department, the Housing Department, that's highly irregular.
Wow, well, doesn't it undercut the credibility of the Bush administration to be commuting the sentence of a top White House official in the same way?
We're not, all I'm trying to tell you is this. The whole narrative here of conspiracy, of evil doing is nonsense. In this town, when you get involved in the policy debate, people push back. What do they impugn? Your credentials. Gee, you're not an expert on WMDs. Or who chose you. Or your political affiliations. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. That's what happens day in and day out. It doesn't have to be nefarious. And the whole thing that the critics have created from outset, the impression that there's something nefarious about it. And Armitage doesn't fit, of course, in the nefarious part.
Going after Joe Wilson would have been fair. That would have been a totally reasonable thing to do. But to endanger national security by outing a covert CIA operative for political purposes.
She was not a covert operative.
The CIA says that she was.
The CIA has never said...
Well, we're going to have to find out whether they knew at the time that she was covert. We're also going to find out whether the battle here wasn't between the CIA and the hawks in the White House, and that Valerie Wilson was seen by the hawks in the White House as a combatant in this fight, because they were very much at war, and a leaking war, as you know, Melanie and I know, living in Washington, between the CIA and the White House. They were leaking back and forth for weeks after we found there was no WMD. Everybody was playing the blame game. They saw Hillary, or rather Valerie, as a combatant on the other side, apparently. Anyway, thank you, Melanie Sloan. Thank you, David Rifkin.